Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Reality Is. My name is Alicia,
And my name is Sanjana.
and before the show starts, we'd like to let viewers know that the values and opinions that are expressed on the show do not reflect the values of Close Up Productions. They're our values and ours alone. And we have a sponsor.
Yes, we do. And now it's my time to shine. We are sponsored by Surrey Honda. So big thanks to them. And you can find them on their website, obviously. So surreyhonda.com. And you can find them at 152nd Street and Fraser Highway.
Awesome. So, as everyone knows, it's the last Thursday of the month, which means we have Kashmir Besla on the show. Yay! The only consistent thing in our life right now.
Wow. So true.
Consistent person in our life. Sorry, I'm not trying to reduce you to an inanimate object. So yes, it's so good to see you again.
Happy to be here again.
Yes.
Thank
you so much. And so we have a bit of a interesting topic as always.
Always.
It is on healthy relationships. Now we've already kind of had a show on this before, and it was kind of more about relationship violence, which is obviously an unhealthy relationship. Right. But we kind of want to give viewers a bit of a taste on the general idea of what healthy relationships are, and a little bit of an idea of what unhealthy relationships are, which can be synonymous with abuse sometimes, but we want to make it general so that, you know, it's something that youth can kind of think about when they're entering relationships, friendships, anything like that for the first time, since you know that's when it kind of starts at that age, right? So let's get into it. I guess the first question is, what is a healthy relationship?
Yeah, that's a great question. And sometimes we don't ask ourselves that question until things start to sort of fall apart. And you're like, is this a good situation or a bad situation? Yeah. And especially since a lot of your viewership is young people who might be dating for the very first time. They don't know what to expect, what's expected of them, what's expected of their partner. But the things that you can keep in mind, like you said, with any relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship or a friendship, is there mutual respect? I feel like I use that word 100 times a day, but respect is really, really important. And there's different ways to show that, right? Okay. Trust is another word that I'm using all the time. Can you trust your partner? Are you always worried about where they're at or what they're doing, or you know, you don't want to let them out of your sight? And we're going to talk about that as well, you know, because you need to have that trust. You also need to have that honesty. So if they tell you that they're going to be at home for the evening and then you find out that they weren't, I mean, that's where the conflict can begin and stuff. Absolutely. Right? So having that honesty as well. And then the topic that we did last week with last month with youth and parents was the whole communication piece. Yes. How are you communicating with your partner? What does that look like? Are you able to be open with them and, you know, feel heard by them? So that's really important. Yes. And then another one is just being able to have those separate identities, because you're two separate people.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Before you came together, and you need to be able to maintain those identities. You don't need to mesh into one. And the funny thing is, I'm always saying this to married couples as well, right? So have your time together, have your time, you know, with other couples, but have your time apart as well, doing your activities and your sports and the things that are important to you. You don't have to drop all of that stuff just because you're in a new romantic relationship.
Exactly. And that is, I think, one of the most important things, because the other ones are like, it's kind of a given, like you know, those are things that, you know, we know about, but that last one, I think, like, it's a new concept that people are trying to kind of understand and recognize that it's important, because oftentimes people mold into one, like two partners mold into one, and then you lose yourself, and then what happens is that you don't know who you are outside of that relationship, and it's very mutually dependent, and at the end of the day, I don't think that's very healthy.
For sure.
Yeah, you lose yourself, and when you're in a healthy relationship, you never want to lose yourself. But what you just described too, what happens when that romantic relationship breaks up?
Yes.
You're devastated.
You are just like rock bottom. Like you have to start from ground up. You have to rebuild yourself, like, you know, and we don't want that if that happens.
For sure. And I see that so often with youth, like, they're willing to put themselves out there in relationships and they end up losing themselves. And it's not about, and sometimes it's not just like, you know, obviously there needs to be a level of like healthy compromising for each other, or like, you know, to make the relationship work in some senses, and also obviously like progressing together and becoming your best version of yourself. But then there's a point where you lose your identity in that relationship, and yeah, like you said, you can't get out of that sometimes.
And you need to maintain who you are and your values and your beliefs, right? You're with this person and you're going to have lots in common, but if there's any point where things just don't mesh, it's okay to be able to step back and say, this isn't working for me. But as I said, a lot of your viewers might be in their first relationships, and after those break up, it can be devastating. And the research shows that the first time you fall in love, there's almost like a chemical change in your brain, because it's such an intense and beautiful and amazing experience. But then when you break up, that's why it always hurts so much when you lose your first love.
Absolutely. So it is, people are not being dramatic, okay? It's a heartbreak. Like, it hurts.
Add to carrots.
So that's a good little synopsis, I guess, of what a healthy relationship is. I know that we have a little game planned as always. Sanjana, do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so for our game, we're going to have Kashmir over here asking us some questions so that we can kind of understand where our misconceptions lie in terms of healthy relationships. And so Kashmir, could you begin by just directing your questions to either Alicia and I? You know the drill. I'm like, why am I explaining this?
She knows.
Thank you for having these here for me as well, too. So these are common things that we come across. And we're not saying in asking these questions that every young person is having sex, but some of these questions do pertain to sex and consent. And I think those are two really important things that barely get talked about, right? So we're going to talk about them in a healthy and respectful way. So maybe we'll start with you, Sanjana. What about true or false? You must be 14 years old to be able to consent to sex.
I feel like 14 might be a bit young, but I'm not exactly sure what age exactly it is. I'm assuming it's 18 because that's when you're an adult legally, but I don't know. I think my misconception kind of lies with that, with the age range.
So the law actually says it's 16 years old. Years ago, it used to be 14.
Oh, wow.
But it got changed to 16. People are having sex at every age. Don't get me wrong.
That's what I was thinking. I'm like, it doesn't stop anyone, right?
It doesn't stop anyone.
Doesn't.
But in terms of legality, 16 is the age of consent, where you can give consent. Any age prior to 16, no one can give consent. 15, 14, 13. So, but again, people are still having sex, and obviously they're giving consent. But in terms of legality, it's 16 years old. So if two 14-year-olds are having sex, very young, first of all, but no one's going to break down the door and say, don't be doing that, in terms of legal issues.
Okay.
Great. So, and the next one is... what do you think, Alicia? Is it okay to have? Is it okay for a guy to say have sex with his girlfriend if they've both been to a party and she's super drunk and he's had sex with her before, but she's barely walking? Do you think it would be okay for him to have sex with her at the end of the night?
Well, I think she is heavily intoxicated, and then at that moment it means that it's non-consensual because she's not giving consent, or maybe it looks like she is, but she's inebriated, and that's a different state of mind.
Right.
So I would say it's false.
Absolutely. So we always caution people to always have consent, and sometimes this gets joked about, like, how do you do that? But there's really respectful ways to do that. But a person who's intoxicated is not going to be able to tell you that it's okay to have sex. So it's better to just wait till they sober up and can give you consent again, because otherwise you might have a really bad situation on your hand where she says, I don't remember saying that was okay, or something happened that I didn't agree to. So you can't have sex with someone who is heavily under the influence, because like you said, they can't give consent.
Exactly. And I also think, like, in that situation, maybe the person feels like they can because it comes from a place of comfort. They are in a relationship and they've had sex before, so they feel like it's not a big deal. But I think the same standards and expectations lie every time you are about to have sex.
So you actually took my next question for Sanjana.
I'm so sorry.
How dare you?
Say you've had sex with your partner multiple times. Do they have the right to say no to you the next time that you want to have sex with them?
After hearing Alicia, after what she did, no, okay.
After what I did.
No, but you know, she made such an excellent point. Like, yeah, definitely. I think you should ask consent every time. I think it's out of just respect for the person to just understand, are they okay with what's happening right now?
Yeah.
They might be in a state of panic, or maybe they just don't feel comfortable, but they don't know how to share it with their partner, that they're not ready for that right now. So yeah, always checking up on that.
Always checking. And you have to have consent every single time. So you can't say, oh, well, she's had sex with me 10 times before. She can't say no to me. Yes, she can. And just as an aside, even with married couples, you're married, right? You've been together for a long time, maybe. You've had sex thousands of times. If one person says, no, not tonight, dear, you have to listen to that. Otherwise, it's considered a sexual assault. Some other situations where you can't have sex with someone, so it's if they're inebriated, if they don't have the mental capacity. So someone who's, doesn't have the mental capacity, might be special needs. They can't give consent either.
Okay.
So that's really important to remember. And a child can never give consent. So even if the kid is saying, I'm okay with that, they actually can never give consent either.
Yeah, it's funny how like it's very black and white, but somehow in our society it that's not how it's painted. For some reason it's gray. You can, this is this is consensual, this isn't. And I remember like I had such a hard time with what consent is, and it wasn't until like maybe university when people sit you down and say like what the product of your socialization is actually teaching you something very, very wrong and dangerous. And is against the law. Like so.
And we see lots of young people who get into trouble because they didn't understand what consent was. We see a lot of older people too, actually, who can get in trouble as a result of it. So it's important to inform yourself, because unfortunately, and I'm not blaming social media for everything, but we get inundated with all of these images making sex look like so cool and so great and so wonderful, which it can be all of those things, but it's also a very personal thing. It's up to you what you want to do with your body. Or something else that doesn't get talked about, what you don't want to do with your body. So if you are practicing abstinence and you don't want to have sex till you're married, or you are absolutely sure that you're with the right person, don't do it. Right? Don't just watch, those social media things of everybody, getting it on and videos and stuff. Everybody is not doing that. That's
that's unrealistic.
I think
expectations are not there.
For sure. I think with high school that a lot of people feel pressured to actually do things that they're not comfortable with.
Or they think everyone else is doing it.
And I think for a long time I was under that impression too. I was like, oh, okay,
that's the thing,
I'm behind.
No one really talks about it truthfully.
No.
So everyone kind of has the same idea, but then it's not even coming from a place of what's actually happening. So
Exactly.
Is there any were there other questions for
There's
you,
a couple more.
Okay, awesome.
I forget, I think it's your turn.
Okay.
But,
Don't
Alicia,
steal my question.
Alicia, is it
Fine.
This is one that I get a lot. Is it abusive for my partner to ask me for my password for all my social media, like my Facebook and Instagram? Do you think true or false?
Sorry, I'm like already jumping into this question because I hear this from a lot of people I know, and I think to myself, why are they even why are they entertaining this? Why is this something that's coming up for them? For me, I'd say 100% no.
So you wouldn't give your password?
I would not give my passwords because I'm not hiding anything, but it's coming from what you said earlier. It's coming from a place of mutual trust and respect for privacy and communication, that everything is in the up and up. I just feel like with that thing, like I have such a big problem with it. Like someone snooping through your things and also, what are you gonna find on there? And there's there's misinterpretation, and there's those things that also come into the picture too. So just be truthful.
Be truthful and have a relationship built on trust, and you don't need to be checking the other person's, social media. There's no need for that if, you have got the communication and the trust.
But it's so common, like for people to do that. Like it's commonplace.
But I've heard such horror stories when they break up too, when they have access to your stuff.
Yes,
they can do some, nasty
That's
things,
true.
right? So I would say respect your partner's privacy, but also have them respect yours as
Yes.
well. I think it's really, really important.
And just to clarify, so you can obviously ask your partner for their social media passwords, and it's also wrong to ask them to show you the messages that they've been sending to some other person as well, right?
I think if you're having those kinds of conversations, there's probably some conflict or mistrust going on, because otherwise it's not necessary.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to look at what kind of relationship you're in. And often I see where it's really one-sided, where, one person gets to see everything that the other person is doing, but the other person says, nah, you don't need to see what I'm doing, right? So if you're having those kinds of conversations, there's probably something deeper going on that you need to look at.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's look at one more maybe.
Okay.
Sanjana, what about if your partner says to you, I feel uncomfortable with the way you're dressing? Do you think that's a sign of abuse, true or false?
So that's actually really tricky, because I think on one hand you want to, I guess, I don't know. I'm so confused. I'm so confused.
How would you
That's
feel
fair.
if
I
you were
would-
seeing someone and he said, I don't like how you dress, or
I don't like
that
how
shirt,
you're
that
dressed.
skirt's
Yeah.
too short,
Or even saying it in a nice way, I don't want you to dress that way.
Yeah, like I would feel kind of uncomfortable with the fact that I think it's like a freedom of expression, and your choice in clothing as well, and the fact that someone's trying to constrain you with that, with those ideas that you're not dressed appropriately, I think that would be pretty upsetting. But I also am trying to think of it like, why would someone say that? Is it also like a special occasion? Is there like is there, I don't know, like a wedding that you need to attend to, and maybe you're not dressed appropriately? So
Yeah.
I'm trying to understand like where that would be coming from.
Right. So I think you've answered it beautifully by saying, like, how does that statement make me feel? Like, is it coming from a place of, I want you to fit in where we're going and dress a certain way for this wedding, or the function that we're going to that wouldn't maybe not be appropriate, or we're trying to make a certain kind of impression to my parents or something, or is it like I'm trying to use power and control and tell you how to dress, and you'll be able to tell. We can't tell. You're in that relationship. You know how that person speaks to you. You know what feels right. So I'm always telling young women, and young men too, but more young women, to really listen to their gut instinct. Like, what are they feeling in that moment, and how is this message coming across? Yeah, that's great.
Thank you for clarifying that. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So should we go on to talk about what unhealthy relationships look
Yeah,
like?
Let's do
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, okay. So asking yourself, does your boyfriend or girlfriend do the following things? I think this is a bit of a checklist.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Okay.
For, if they're doing these things, do they get angry when you don't drop everything for him or her? Right? So that comes back to what we were saying before about losing yourself, right? Everything is about just the two of you, right? That's unhealthy, right? You have to have your own identities, your own things that you enjoy doing apart from each other. You don't have to be on the phone together 24/7. I've heard everything from, talking all night long to, which is lovely, but it's not realistic,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
I want to say one thing. It's also like, yes, being angry, like that makes you feel a certain way, but even like guilting you or making you feel like you're making you feel guilty that you're not spending enough time with them.
Right.
So I feel like those are more subtle ways of like being unhealthy in that relationship.
Yeah, always making you choose them instead of the other things
like,
that
why
might
can't
be
you
important.
you don't love me?
Yes.
Like, that's the stuff I feel like really, like, those are the subtle things that kind of get you, because that person's being so sweet. They're not yelling at me, but they're still the same thing.
So people can use, that's a really important point, power and control by being manipulative too, right? So power and control is not always yelling and being abusive. They can be manipulative and still being power and controlling
Absolutely.
you, right?
Yeah. But I did actually have a question. Like, how do you know if they're just voicing out the fact that they don't feel like they're getting enough time or support in certain areas that you would like, or if they're actually being manipulative and trying to guilt you?
Yeah. I think it comes to what I said to you before. You'll know. You're in that relationship. It's been a couple of months. You know how that person, speaks with you. You feel like that you spend enough time or don't. Or are you already starting to think, I miss my best friend. He doesn't want me to hang around with my best friend. Or I haven't played soccer in a month and I love playing soccer.
Yeah.
So you'll be able to to figure those things out as well.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
Good tip.
We already did the one about criticizing the way I look or dress.
Okay.
Or they could, say that, or saying things like, "You're never going to find anyone as good as me. Like, I'm the best you're ever going to get." Right? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's pretty abusive too, because that's playing on the person's self-esteem. Right? And sometimes, whether you're younger or older, you're afraid to give up what you have because you don't believe in yourself that you might get something better.
Yeah.
Right? So a lot of times people will stay in unhealthy relationships because they don't want to make the effort of going out there and finding somebody else, because they just settle, with what they have. And that's usually not a good thing to do either.
Yeah,
right?
I also think maybe they don't even have a good relationship with themselves to have that self-confidence to say, I'm okay with myself, like being by myself. I don't even have to be with anyone right now.
Yeah.
Like they're okay with the worst case scenario.
Yeah. And again, social media, right? Everyone is coupled. Everyone is together.
Especially now, like cupping season and stuff.
Yeah. And Valentine's and all those other things, those pressures of being with someone.
Absolutely.
It's abusive if your boyfriend or girlfriend is keeping you from seeing your friends or from talking to other people. Yeah. I don't want you talking to those guys. I don't want you talking to those girls. Yeah. Right? So that can be quite abusive too. You got to ask yourself, why? Why is he stopping me? And again, back to, is it for a good reason? Like, are those people really bad in my life? Or is it, again, power and control? So being able to figure that out, right?
I want to say one more thing, though.
Sure.
It's also like there's these little cutesy things that people do, like being, oh, my boyfriend or girlfriend is overprotective, like, oh, it makes me feel wanted, but you got to see how often they're doing it. When they're doing it, is a pattern of it.
Is it possessive?
Is it really possessive?
Yeah.
Right,
That's where I feel like you have to be more in tune with how you feel, for you to kind of categorize it correctly.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. Again, we said, making me quit my activities even though I love them, right? I don't go to dance anymore because he says, oh, you don't need to dance anymore, right? Spend those hours with me, but you're really missing that activity. Yeah. That can be an unhealthy relationship too. Yeah. This one seems more obvious, but ever raising a hand to you, yelling at you, hitting you, or even threatening to hit you. That's definitely abusive. You don't need to be in a relationship like that. And then what we were talking about earlier around, consent and sexuality, like trying to force me to go further sexually than I'm ready to or that I want to. That's definitely a sign of an unhealthy relationship. So sometimes all of these things are happening and you don't even see them. So we want young people to be able to recognize them and know that, when you get that gut feeling that this is not good for me, I need to get out of this.
Let's normalize gut feelings.
Yes,
Seriously, like, I don't feel good. Like, maybe there's a reason. Let's be more
Well, it's actually, it's very intuitive, and it's a real thing. So it's not a made-up thing. Oh, yeah. When your body starts to feel that way, it's like an alarm bell going off inside of you. And why do we ignore that? We should never ignore that, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like literally a gut feeling, like in your stomach. You just don't feel like how you used to before,
right.
like that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure.
But yeah, I actually had a question for you. It's like a very specific scenario. Okay. So I've heard of a couple of my friends, and they'll say, well, my partner doesn't want me to like other pictures of pictures on Instagram of other girls, and I don't want the same for him. So I'm wondering, is that kind of like a mutual unhealthy relationship, or or even if one person is saying that to the other person?
Yeah, you know what? That's kind of a tricky one. You got to look at what's happening in the relationship and why that person is asking that person to not like pictures. Again, with the whole social media stuff, the stuff can get so the nuance of it is it just a like, or is it a like?
Is it
Would you like that person?
Is it a save
or a comment, or what is it about?
What does he mean by that?
So I think those are important conversations to have. But again, if you trust your partner and they're liking every picture that they receive, they just happen to like every picture that they receive, right? But if there's something else going on, I think you're going to pick up on that pretty quickly. And if you're with someone who says, no, that's a deal breaker, don't like any pictures, you got to see if you want to stay in that relationship. Is that, how much of that are you willing to give up? Or is it something that you want to continue doing and you don't want to give it up.
Yeah, because
right?
like obviously in a relationship it's all about compromise, right? But everyone has their limits. When so much so that you realize that like your core values or your core genuine self is being like literally ripped off from you. So that's when I think too much compromise is happening. You know.
Yes. Yeah. Again, how is this relationship going? And talking to other people and talking to adults and, you know, just being honest about what's happening. Because kids are, I think, kind of being pressured to date younger and younger. So I know your viewership ranges in age from, you know, high school kids to young adults. And there is no, you know, age. You don't have to do anything if you don't feel ready to do it. Just because everyone else in your life is dating, if you're like, you know what, I don't need to try that right now, then don't. Right? But if you want to go out and meet people and you want to, you know, start a romantic relationship, that's fine too, right? But sometimes it can get a bit confusing, like, is this love or is this lust? So I think you need to, you know,
oh my gosh, yeah, that's another
slow things down, because when you're young, the hormones are pretty high and, you know, you're curious and you want to try stuff. So, you know, just taking it slow, I think, is really important.
Yeah, take it slow.
For
That's
sure.
a good one.
And I did have one question. So say if there are like past circumstances where there's been, you've caught like someone cheating or something of that sort, because that happens.
And it's
so
I want to say
sad.
it's like completely normalized, but I've heard a lot of people being cheated on, unfortunately. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and like under those circumstances, are there certain things that that you would do that's actually not toxic or not unhealthy? Like maybe if you check their phone or if you check their messages or you ask them to give you an update about where they're going.
Yeah. You know what? I think in my work, you know, situations where people are cheating, unfortunately, are becoming more and more common.
Yeah.
But it's different for everyone despite your age. Sometimes that cheating, it can be a deal breaker and you can say, I don't want to ever be with this person again. Other times people want to give that person a second, third, fourth chance and go to counseling and make it work. So it really does depend on the couple and kind of where they're at, where their maturity's at. And some people don't believe in monogamy and think that there's more than one person out there for them. So those are all really big conversations that you need to be having with your partner.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have another question here. So have you come across any situations that are actually more of a safety concern when it comes to, so that it pertains to youth?
Absolutely. So something that I've seen in my career quite a bit, and it's still happening to this day, and kids are going to be like, oh no, you're telling on me, but I'm not. I'm I'm trying to keep young people safe, is that there's still some kids who will sneak out at night. So parents think that, you've heard this before, right? Parents think that.
I've heard the stories.
Sandra did not do this, but she's heard. You know, they sneak out at night. Parents think they're fast asleep and they find them in their bed the next morning, but they're actually gone all night. And the reason I don't think that this is a good idea is, first of all, you're making yourself really vulnerable. You're out there, you know, and nobody knows that you're out there. And there's even been circumstances, unfortunately and very sadly, where, you know, a young person could be sexually assaulted during those hours, but then she's too afraid to tell anyone because she'll be like, but I'll get in trouble because I was sneaking
in
out.
The first place.
In
like,
the first place,
double
right?
trouble,
It's double trouble, and sadly, some young men take advantage of that too. Like, she's not going to report this because she wasn't supposed to be here anyways, right? And the fact that most women, you know, a large majority of them don't report assaults in the first place. So all kinds of bad news with sneaking out. So having that relationship with parents and behaving, you know, age appropriately, and, you know, when you're going out, letting people know who you're with and what party you're going to and what time you're going to be home. I think those are just safety measures that all people need to put in place these days to protect themselves.
Yeah,
so
that's a good one. Yeah, it's kind of like, not that I'm saying I did it, but in hindsight, I think that you realize that the bigger picture of like what you're doing.
When you're young, you take all kinds of risks, right? I mean, we haven't even talked about using protection if you are going to have sex, right? So there's all kinds of things that, you know, lead into becoming, you know, a young adult and then an adult, and it's all a learning experience. But we don't want you to get, you know, hurt in ways that can't be fixed.
Exactly.
Right? So getting all the right information and making good decisions and having consent these are big topics, and I know we've just barely touched on them, but they're really important.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a topic with many layers and
Yes.
levels, but it's always good to start from the beginning, from a little general sense, so that you know it can get a little overwhelming. But just to have that foundational knowledge, so that if you do encounter any situation like that, you kind of know at least a little bit how to react and how to act.
Okay, everyone. So thank you so much, Kashmir, for sharing your insight on this topic. Really helping connect viewers and providing knowledge for me, especially because I totally need this.
Me too. I'm still learning.
Yes, we're all learning here.
We're all learning. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah, just like providing us insight on like a healthy relationship, because we're always hearing what not to do, but it's good to hear what are the things that we should actually look for in a relationship and take those things to a new level. And yeah, being ready to explore those ideas is really important.
Yeah. Coming from someone who, you know, works in the field and is really open-minded to having these conversations, I think it helps the viewers to get a very well-rounded perspective on the information and knowing the reality of the situation, which is our show. So thank you so much again, Kashmir, for coming on every month, for taking the time out for doing this for us.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the opportunity to share some of this information. And again, we've just barely touched, you know, on some of these topics that we're doing every month. So just a reminder for young people, if they're struggling, if they need some help, to always reach out and talk to someone. There will be someone there to assist them for sure.
Absolutely. And before we go, we have a talent show coming up. As we're affiliated with Close Look, they have a talent show in November. Registration is now open. So if you go to Close Look United Foundation at gmail.com, you can get more information about the registration process. This is for all youth under 25, poets, artists, dancers, innovators, anyone. Come out and take advantage of this opportunity to show yourself and to shine. So yeah, with that being said, let's sign out. Join us Thursdays at 6 p.m. and get inspired, everyone.